The day I bought back my family farm, my brother did not recognize me. He stood near the old oak tree with his arms crossed, watching the auction like it had nothing to do with him. Like the land behind him was just dirt. Like our mother had not walked those fields with her hands full of soil. Like I had not spent half my life keeping that farm alive while he was somewhere else, chasing easier dreams. I stood at the back of the crowd in a dark blazer and sunglasses, listening to strangers bid on the place where my mother taught me how to read the earth. Nobody knew who I was. Not the auctioneer, not the developer in the gray suit, not the neighbors whispering near the broken porch, not even Chase. My own brother. He only understood when the auctioneer asked whose name should go on the deed. I stepped forward, took the pen and said, "Rowan Cole." That was when Chase finally looked at me, really looked at me. The color left his face. Because in that moment he understood what everyone else was about to understand. The sister he had thrown off that farm had come back and bought it out from under him. And this time nobody could make me leave. It started with a piece of paper on my desk. I was at the warehouse before sunrise, the way I usually was. Outside my office, my trucks were loading for the morning run, coolers humming, forklifts beeping. Workers calling out orders. Lettuce, kale, tomatoes, herbs, all moving through the cold warehouse and out toward restaurants across the Midwest. Heartland Organic Distribution had become exactly what people told me I could never build. A company with real trucks, real clients, real employees, real money, no investors, no family help, no father signing checks, no brother making calls, just me. Then I saw the notice. Cole Family Farm, foreclosure auction. For a second, my mind refused to understand the words. I picked up the paper before I even realized my hand had moved. The coffee beside me had gone cold. I had poured it hours earlier and forgotten it existed. The notice said the farm was being sold. The farm my grandfather cleared. The farm my mother loved. The farm I worked from childhood until the day my brother pushed me off it. The farm my father promised me over and over, then signed away because Chase was the son. I read the notice again, then again. The words stayed the same. My operations manager, Marcus Webb, appeared in the doorway. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said. I folded the notice and slid it under my keyboard. "Just bills." He did not believe me. Marcus knew me too well for that, but he also knew when not to push. He nodded once and went back to the loading floor. I sat there staring at the corner of the paper. Cole Family Farm. Those words should have felt like home. Instead, they felt like a wound reopening. There were things nobody in that warehouse knew about me. They knew I owned Heartland. They knew I had built it from one truck and a rented storage space into a serious distribution company. They knew restaurants trusted me because I delivered clean food, on time, without excuses. But they did not know why I built it. I built it because my father gave my future to my brother, and my brother gave me a deadline to leave. The last time I had stood on that farm, I was loading everything I owned into the back of my pickup truck. Clothes, tools, my mother's green soiled journal, my dog Susie, who kept pacing beside me because she knew something was wrong. I drove away with almost nothing. No home, no inheritance, no apology. Just an old truck, a scared dog, and a promise I made to myself while crying on the side of the road. One day, I would own something nobody could take from me. I thought that something was Heartland. I was wrong. Because the moment I saw that auction notice, I knew the truth. Part of me had never left that farm. My mother taught me to read soil before I learned to read books. She would take me out into the fields in the morning when the ground was still damp. She would scoop up a handful of earth and hold it out to me like treasure. "Look first," she would say, "then smell, then listen." I used to laugh at that. "Land does not talk, Mama." She would smile and crumble the soil between her fingers. "Oh, it talks. People just forget how to hear it." She knew which fields needed rest, which rows held moisture, which corner would flood if the rain came too hard, which soil smelled alive and which soil had been pushed too far. My father handled contracts, equipment loans, and grain prices. My mother understood the land. She kept a green cloth journal full of notes. Planting plans, rainfall, soil treatment, Crop rotation. What worked? What failed? What the land seemed to be asking for. When she died, that journal became the closest thing I had to her voice. I was still young when she got sick, too young to lose a mother, old enough to know the house changed the moment she was gone. My father did not fall apart loudly. He still woke up early, still went outside, still watched the weather, still paid bills and signed papers, but something in him closed. Someone had to keep the farm moving, so I did. I learned the books. I called suppliers. I tracked repairs. I managed seasonal help. I studied the fields the way my mother had taught me. My father started relying on me without ever admitting it. I would place the papers in front of him and show him where to sign. He would nod and say, "You always were your mother's daughter." Then he started saying something else. "This land will be yours someday, Rowan." He said it at the kitchen table. He said it during harvest. He said it under the oak tree where my mother used to sit. I believed him. Why would I not? I was the one who stayed. Chase left as soon as he could. He said he was not spending his life in a tractor. He wanted the city, big money, big plans. He came home sometimes with stories about sales, jobs, restaurants, and people who were always about to make him rich. He never asked about the Northfield, never fixed a pump, never walked the fence line, never came home with dirt under his nails. But he was the son. And in my father's mind, that was a kind of work all by itself. When my father got sick, Chase came back. He said it was only to help. I wanted to believe that. I really did. I told myself maybe grief had changed him. Maybe he had finally realized the farm mattered. Maybe he had come home because family meant more than pride. But every evening he sat with my father behind closed doors. Low voices, long pauses, papers on the table. Whenever I walked in, they stopped talking. Then one afternoon, my father called me into the kitchen. Chase stood near the refrigerator, looking down at the floor like even he knew this was wrong. My father sat at the table. His hand shook slightly, his voice did not. "I signed the farm over to your brother," he said. At first, I thought I had heard him wrong. I looked at Chase. He did not look back. My father kept talking. "The deed is in his name now. He is the son, Rowan, you understand." I did not understand. I walked to the sink and turned on the cold water. I put my hands under it and stood there until my fingers went numb. My father said my name once. Then again. Then he stopped. Chase left the room without a word. Not long after, I received the notice to leave. Chase did not hand it to me himself. Of course he did not. He sent someone else. When I called him, his voice was calm. "Nothing personal, Ro. Dad wanted the Cole name protected. You know how things work." I did know that was the problem. I had spent years pretending it would be different for me. I packed my life in silence. My mother's journal, my tools, a few boxes. Susie watched me the whole time, her one stubborn ear flopped sideways, her eyes following every movement like she knew we were being pushed out of the only home she had ever known. Before I drove away, I stood in the driveway and looked at everything. The porch, the gravel, the equipment shed, the old oak tree, the fields. The air smelled like turned earth and diesel. Everything looked the same, only I had been removed from it. I did not cry in the driveway. I cried after I crossed the county line. I pulled over where nobody knew me and sobbed until my ribs hurt. Susie put her head in my lap and whined. Then I wiped my face and kept driving. I thought I was leaving the farm behind. But land has a way of waiting. After I found the auction notice, I started pulling records. Property records, tax records, loan records, everything I could get without asking Chase a single question. The story was ugly but simple. Chase had borrowed against the land again and again. He had taken money out of soil he had never cared for. He had missed payments, ignored taxes, let the bank move in. The farm was not just neglected, it had been drained. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office. The building smelled like old paper and toner, the way all county offices do. A woman at the counter pulled the physical file without asking why I needed it. The folder was thick. Chase's signature was everywhere. I knew that signature, the same loop he had practiced in high school while I did his homework at the kitchen table. Loan after loan, paper after paper. A farm treated like an ATM by a man who had never learned how to care for it. The auction was real, and it was close. I drove out to the farm a few days later. I told myself I was just going to look. That was a lie. You do not drive back to the place that broke your heart just to look. The first thing I noticed was the silence. A working farm is never completely quiet. There is always a hum somewhere. A pump, a fan, a truck, a loose piece of metal tapping in the wind. But this silence felt dead. The irrigation system was broken, pipes split, wires exposed. The control panel I had rewired with my own hands years earlier hung open like someone had torn its chest apart and walked away. I walked to the Northfield first, my mother's favorite. It used to be dark and rich, the kind of soil that held water and smelled alive. Now it was pale and tired. Weeds had taken over patches where crops should have been. The land looked like it had been asked to give and give and give until there was nothing left. I knelt and picked up a handful of soil. It crumbled too quickly. No weight, no smell, no life. I felt anger then, not loud anger, the quiet kind. The kind that does not leave. The equipment shed was worse. Tools still hung where I had placed them years earlier. My old maintenance binders sat on a shelf under a layer of dust. Nobody had touched them. The porch sagged. Paint peeled from the farmhouse. The mailbox was bent. Someone had lived there for a while after I left, but even that felt abandoned now. I walked the farm for hours. Every field, every broken system, every neglected corner. I took photos because I needed proof of what Chase had done. Maybe for the county, maybe for the bank, maybe for the version of my father who had once promised me this land and then decided my hands did not matter as much as my brother's name. The old oak tree was the only thing that looked unchanged. Older, yes. Bigger, maybe. But still standing. I pressed my palm against the bark. The tree did not care whose name was on the deed. It had seen all of us come and go. Susie waited in the truck. She was older now and too tired for long walks, but when I got back, she sat up and looked at me like she was asking if we were done. "We are not done yet," I told her. I did not know then that another buyer wanted the farm. Not for crops. Not for soil, for lots. I went to see Bill Hartman at the county extension office. Bill had known my mother. He had watched me bring soil samples in as a kid. He knew our farm almost as well as we did. When I walked into his office, he looked up and said my name softly. "Rowan Cole." He did not smile, but his voice was kind. "I heard what happened. I am sorry." Nobody in my family had said those words to me. Not once. I told him I needed every soil record he had for the farm. He pulled them. Years of logs, crop rotations, soil treatments, yield reports, my handwriting, my signature, my work. Page after page proving what everyone in that county already knew if they cared to say it out loud. I had been running that farm, not Chase. Bill scrolled through the records and shook his head. "Anybody who knows agriculture can see who carried that land," he said. "And it was not your brother." Then he told me about the developer. A company from the city had registered for the auction. They had plans to divide the farm into lots and turn it into a subdivision. They already had a name for it, Cole Acres. My family name printed on a development sign where my mother's fields used to be. For a moment I could see it. A paved road cutting through the Northfield. Mailboxes where corn used to stand. Streetlights where fireflies used to drift. A fake farmhouse sign at the entrance. Cole Acres. The name made me want to be sick. Bill looked at me carefully. "Whatever you are thinking of doing, those records will back you up." He was wrong about one thing. They would not just back me up. They would remind me who I was. Then I went to see Alina Ruiz. She had been the farm accountant for longer than I could remember. Her office sat downtown between a bakery and a second-hand shop. It smelled like coffee and paper and that old adding machine tape she refused to stop using. When I walked in, she looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Let me get the files." No speech, no pity, just the files. She pulled the old ledgers from storage, big green books, farm income, seed purchases, equipment repairs, harvest contracts, seasonal labor. Entries in my handwriting going back to when I was still too young to legally run anything but old enough to be expected to save everything. I turned the pages slowly. The ink had faded in some places, but there I was, everywhere. Then Alina said, "There is one more thing." She told me someone had been sending small payments for years to keep certain farm records maintained. Money orders, no name, just a post office box. She had always wondered who it was. I looked at the ledger. It was me. Alina sat back. You were paying to protect a farm that was not yours. I looked at her. The farm never cared whose name was on the deed. It only knew who showed up. She nodded slowly. When I asked for copies, she made them without charging me. Before I left, she put her hand on my arm. Your mother would be proud of you. I almost broke right there, but I did not. I carried the copies to my truck. Susie sniffed them like she knew they mattered. That night, I registered Heartland Organic Distribution as a bidder. Chase did not know. The developer did not know. The county did not know. Nobody knew the company coming to bid on Cole family farm belonged to the daughter they had watched leave with boxes in the back of her truck, especially not my brother. On the morning of the auction, I parked down the road and walked in. I could have driven all the way up. I did not. I wanted to feel the gravel under my boots. I wanted to arrive on that land the way I had left it, on my own feet. The farmhouse porch sagged beside the auction table. Cars were parked near the equipment shed. Neighbors stood in small groups. Investors looked around like they were already measuring where driveways might go. I stayed near the back, dark blazer, hair pulled back, sunglasses. I looked like a businesswoman evaluating an asset. That was true, but not the whole truth. Then I saw Chase. He stood near the oak tree with his arms crossed. He had gotten heavier, softer, smaller in ways that had nothing to do with his body. His blazer did not fit right, and his face wore the bored expression of a man watching something unfortunate happen to land he had already lost in his mind. He did not recognize me. That hurt less than I expected. The developer's representative arrived in a polished car. Gray suit, clipboard, calm confidence. He had done this before. He saw lots, roads, driveways, 3-car garages. I saw my mother's hands in the dirt. I saw my father standing under the oak tree promising me the land. I saw myself at 15 calling suppliers because someone had to. I saw Susie as a young dog running along the fence line. I saw everything. The bidding started low. A neighbor made an offer, but everyone knew he could not compete. The developer raised it, then raised it again. The auctioneer scanned the crowd. I spoke. My voice cut through the cold morning air. Heads turned. The developer looked at me for the first time, then dismissed me. Just another bidder, just business. He raised. I raised. He raised again. I kept going. The crowd got quiet. At some point, the developer looked at me and realized I was not there to scare easily. He checked his clipboard. Then he stopped. The auctioneer called it once, then again. The gavel came down. It was a small sound, wood on wood. But across that farm, it felt like thunder. Sold to Heartland Organic Distribution. For a moment, nobody knew whether to clap. Then a few people did. I walked forward. The auctioneer asked for the name on the deed. I took the pen. Rowan Cole, I said, and I wrote it slowly, clearly. The auctioneer looked at the paper, then at me, then past me. I followed his eyes. Chase was staring. His arms had dropped to his sides. His face changed in pieces. Confusion first, then recognition, then something close to fear. Not because he was scared of me, because he finally understood. The sister he had evicted had just bought back his foreclosure. I took off my sunglasses. Hello, Chase. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. The crowd seemed to fade around us. The old oak tree stood behind him, steady as ever. Finally, he whispered my name. Rowan. I did not answer. There was nothing to explain. He looked at the auction table, at the deed papers, at the farm, at me. Then he said the one thing I had never expected. Dad was wrong. 3 words, that was all. I had imagined this moment many times. I imagined Chase yelling, laughing, denying, blaming me, calling me bitter, calling it business. I had prepared for all of that. I had not prepared for honesty, because those words were not really from Chase. They were from our father, and our father was gone. He had died while I was still in exile. I found out late through someone who thought I probably already knew. I never got an apology, never got a phone call. Never got to ask why. Why did the son who left deserve the land? Why did the daughter who stayed have to prove herself twice? Why did my hands not count? So when Chase said, "Dad was wrong," it did not heal me. It confirmed the wound. I looked at him for a long time. "Yes," I said, "he was." Chase swallowed. "What are you going to do with it?" "Restore the soil," I said. "Run it as an organic farm. Feed my own distribution network. Do what I was always going to do." He nodded. For the first time in my life, Chase looked like a man who understood he had been handed something he was never strong enough to hold. Then he asked, "Is there anything for me?" I let the question sit between us. "You can visit," I said, his eyes lifted, "but you will never own it again." He did not argue, maybe because he knew he had no right. Maybe because all the fight had gone out of him. He nodded and walked toward his car. He did not look back. The crowd thinned. The auctioneer packed up. One old neighbor tipped his cap to me. Another woman squeezed my arm and said my mother would have loved this. I wanted to answer. I could not. Then I was alone. The farm was quiet again, but it was different now. Not dead quiet, waiting quiet. The kind of quiet soil has before rain. I walked to the old oak tree. The bark was rough under my hand. My mother used to sit there with a paperback book, her back against the trunk. When I was little, I climbed the lowest branch and pretended I could see the whole world from there. I sat in her old spot and pulled the green cloth journal from my bag. My mother's journal. The one thing I took when I left. The one thing that had followed me through every year of rebuilding myself. The pages smelled faintly of dust and paper and something I always imagined was her. I opened it to the inside cover. There was a note there I had read many times, but on that land under that tree it felt new. The soil remembers what you give it. Give it care, it gives back. Give it nothing, it takes everything with it when it goes. I closed the journal and looked out at the north field. It was tired, pale, wounded, but it was still there. That mattered. Some things do not need to be perfect to be saved. They only need someone willing to show up. I thought about my father. The man who taught me to work and then decided work did not matter as much as being a son. I did not forgive him. Not then, maybe not ever. But I understood something I had not understood when I was younger. He was not cruel in the way villains are cruel. He was ordinary in a way that can be just as damaging. He believed the world had an order. Sons inherit. Daughters help. Sons carry the name. Daughters carry the weight. He was wrong. And wrong can destroy a life just as easily as hate can. I sat under that tree until the cold worked through my coat and into my bones. When I finally stood, my legs were stiff. I walked back to my truck and drove home. The gravel sounded the same under the tires. The air smelled like earth and early spring. Everything was different. Everything was the same. Susie was waiting at the door when I got home. Her tail moved slowly now, but it moved. Her muzzle was gray. One ear still refused to stand upright. I knelt and held her face in my hands. She licked my chin once, just once. She had never been overly affectionate. She showed love by staying close. "We are home, girl," I said. She tilted her head, that crooked ear falling sideways. And for the first time in years, the word home did not hurt. That night, I spread my mother's journal on the kitchen table beside the soil records, the ledgers, and the farm photos. I made a list. Not of what Chase had broken, of what I would restore. The irrigation, the north field, the equipment shed, the porch, the old fence line, the soil, especially the soil, because the farm was mine, not because a paper finally said so, not because I had won an auction, not because Chase lost. It was mine because I had loved it when there was nothing to gain. I had protected it when nobody was watching. I had come back when it was easier to stay gone. The farm had always been mine. I just had to become the woman who could prove it.